Well, those are our stories for the day, and you know what that does? It reminds me of a certain person. He's mean, he's green, and he's only 17. That's right, it's Dan Howell, and it's time for his watch. Dan Howell Watch, that is. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch, I'm Raheem Sterling. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you know, the whole world has been infected with World Cup fever, and there is no known cure apart from goals. Dan has been playing in the World Cup representing his home nation of Siberia. Dan is Siberian. If you're a true fan with a PH, you would know this. Now, Dan has not been having a great World Cup. He's only scored 50 goals. They were expecting a lot more out of him. Part of the problem was that Dan accidentally kicked so hard that his shoe fell off and then he lost his shoe, so he has been playing most of the tournament with a single shoe, which has limited his famous striking abilities. Nevertheless, it looks like Siberia may take home the gold, which is weird because there's also been reports that football's coming home, so I don't really know how that's going to fit together. Maybe he'll switch to England at the end. We'll have to wait and see, but either way, I can't remember what I was talking about, but football's coming home. This has been Football Watch? No, that's not right. It's been Dan Howell Watch. Pow, pow. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. The specific timely references are going to really graphically date this whole episode. You can't cease and desist a segment on a comedy show. Like, you don't own that. I know it's your name. Dan, I know it's your name, but it's not like, I don't make fun of you. I tell accurate stories about your life. What? Our daily phone call is usually so nice and so friendly, and I find it really sad that you are... Well, you know I haven't got that kind of money. Well, you can sue me, but you're not going to get the money because I don't have that kind of money. Alright, love you too. I'm just going to do it anyway. It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. Turn, look, point. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you may know, the World Cup came to a thrilling conclusion this past week. And Dan, of course, was part of the winning French team, him citing his double nationality. Dan is actually half French. Howell is a French surname, which means little secret keeper. Dan was thrilled to win the World Cup, but unfortunately when he hoisted the World Cup above his head, his arms were so tired from doing such a good football that he did drop the trophy on his head, putting him into an instant coma for a few hours. Now, while he was in that coma, Dan had the most incredible, revelatory dream. I mean, this dream was incredible. It's psychedelic, funny, hilarious. You would have loved to have heard about this dream, but unfortunately he told me that it's a secret and I can't tell anyone, and that's such a shame, and I know about it and you don't know about it, and isn't that a real shame? But I do know about it and it is real. He's fine now, he's back home. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode, I love that show, just my favourite show. Well, those are our stories for the week, and you know what that means. It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm a super trooper. Beams are going to blind me, but I won't fall blue. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you know, Dan is finishing up his Interactive Extroverts tour, which has been making its way across the US of A. Yeehaw! And of course, Dan has been trying lots of different American experiences and treats, and this week, Dan tried a sandwich for the first time. Yes, it was the first time Dan ever wrapped his mouth around this American delicacy. Now, unfortunately, Dan did do it wrong, and he didn't know how to eat the sandwich. He picked it up from the plate, he brought it slowly towards him, but instead of simply eating the sandwich, he sort of pressed it into his face. He just pressed it very hard into his face, like a pillow, and everyone around him was like, why are you doing that? Why don't you just eat it? What the hell are you doing? Just eat the sandwich. Dan, what the hell, man? Wait, Dan, man, just eat the sandwich. Like, what are you doing? But instead he continued to just press it into his face, but then he took it away and he said, I know what I was doing. And he turned it around and the sandwich had actually made a perfect mold of his face. And everyone was quite impressed and they went, oh, light, like not, but just a light golf clap. And he gave that to the owner of the deli and said, there you go, that's a picture of me, and he signed it. He goes, that's a signed picture of me you got there. You can put that on your wall. The deli owner was like, what? Who are you? I don't even know who are you? What is going on? Why did you put ink on my sandwich? By that point, Dan had already left. It's been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode, I love that. That was actually the first episode that was completely true. Didn't make up any of that, it was all true. I read about it in GQ. This actually reminds me of a time that I was, it's kind of dumb, I was on holiday in Paris. The locals call it Paris, I speak fluent French. And I was at the Louvre. And looking at the art, and there was this one painting that all the tourists, you know, freaking tourists, they have no taste. They were all around this one painting, and it was like behind glass. This painting of some chick. So I, you know, I used to be in the special forces, so I kind of snuck behind the glass. No one even saw. I was kind of fast as lightning, and I stole the painting, took it home, and I'd actually, even though I'd never taken an art class before, I did manage to create like a pretty good copy using just whatever, you know, paints, and I didn't have a lot of paint, so I kind of used like ketchup and just whatever I found around the house. Anyway, so I made like a copy of this painting, and then I went back to the museum and smuggled it back in, and then I put my fake painting back behind the glass, thinking everyone would be like, that's a fake painting. But they actually thought it was the real one, and it's been there for, I think, 10 years now, and everyone thinks it's the real one. And I've got the real one, and I don't know what to do with it now. But that's, yeah, apparently it's called like the freaking, I think Mona Lisa or something. But it's just like so random. You know, I didn't even know I could do art, but I guess I'm kind of the best in the world. So it's just like a fun story. You know? Well, those are our stories for the day, and that reminds me of a joke. What's black and white and red all over? I don't know, but also, it's time for Filled In! Welcome to Filled In, I'm Tan France. What's Phil Lester been up to this week? Well, as you know, Phil has, throughout his life, harboured a dream. He's been very public about this dream, and that dream is to build the world's smallest sandwich. Now, Phil has always dreamed about doing this, but he's been so busy with his tour, with his YouTube career, he's never got round to sitting down and just trying to make the world's smallest sandwich. Well, luckily, Phil had a bit of extra time this week, so he sat down and really got to work. And he did all the equations, he carried the one. He was, you know, working out all the logistics, he was getting breads of different kinds. He actually travelled to many different locations, different cultures to try different breads and see what the smallest bread they could get was. Well, Phil reckoned he'd done it. He called Dan and he said, Dan, come over here. Come and look at the freaking... And Dan was like, it's not the sandwich. He's like, come and look at the freaking sandwich. And he called him and he says, look at this, I've made the world's smallest sandwich. Now, the problem is the sandwich that Phil had made was 6 foot by 6 foot, which, as you'll come to realise, is actually much larger than even a normal sandwich. He had accidentally constructed a sandwich that was about as big as this table. And he was like, look, I made it the world's smallest sandwich. And Dan just didn't have the heart to tell him, you know what I mean? Because it's like, he'd worked so hard, and Dan was just like, yeah, that's pretty good, Phil. You've made it, it's a pretty small sandwich. And Phil was like, it's the world's smallest. Dan was like, yeah, maybe. He's like, maybe? This is the world's smallest sandwich. And he was like, yeah, whatever. Just kind of left the room. But so at the end of the day, he thinks he's done it. You know what I mean? And I don't want to... I know he watches this show, so hopefully he doesn't watch this segment. I know he's an avid viewer of this show. But yeah, it's not small at all. This has been Filled In. Great segment, realistic. Dear Mr. Paul, thank you for getting in touch. I'm not really looking for a job right now, but I do appreciate the offer. I actually feel quite bad now, so I'm just going to give you your nudes back. Please don't ever email me again. Well, those are our stories for the day, and you know what that means. It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch, I'm Raven Simone. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, Dan made a trip to M&M World in the hopes of finding that green M&M and proposing to her. Hey Dan, join the queue. Well, Dan made his way to M&M World and he started walking around and he was looking at all the stuff they had there and he was thinking, I can't see a lot of M&Ms. There doesn't seem to be a lot of actual candy in this M&M World. There's a lot of beanie hats and oversized like hoodies and seems to be quite a lot of rap music playing, but this isn't M&M World. So he tapped a nearby person who worked there on the shoulder and he said, excuse me, good sir, is this M&M World? And he said, yo dude, this is M&M World. It was at that point that Dan realised his hilarious mistake. He hadn't gone to M&M World, he'd gone to Jay-Z World. And obviously those sound really similar, and that's why he'd made that mistake. So he just bought a copy of the blueprint and listened to it all the way home. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch, the show that just continues to give Dan Howell reasons to sue me. Oh, that's depressing. Let's just do some Dan Howell Watch. That'll cheer us up. It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Old Man Johnson. It was him who was haunting the theme park, and I would have got away with it too if it wasn't for Dan Howell and his freaking watch. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you may know, Dan has a little walk-on role in the brand new Fantastic Beasts film, Fantastic Beasts 2, Too Many Beasts. He'll be playing the role of Olivant Crandon, a young wizard with a heart of silver. Well, Dan was over at the studios the other day practicing his line. He has to come on and go, "Cool, blimey, look at all these beasts! They're fantastic!" And so he was rehearsing it. He was trying different voices. He was like, maybe I'll do a regional dialect. But, why, hey man, look at all these beasts. There's so many beasts, man. Trying different things out. And who should walk over to him than the star of the Fantastic Beasts franchise, Daniel Radcliffe, who of course plays the titular beast. And Daniel Radcliffe turned to him and I do a bit of a Daniel Radcliffe impression, and apparently it's quite good. So if you'll indulge me for a second, I will do my Daniel Radcliffe impression. Hello there, Daniel. I'm Daniel Radcliffe. You're Dan Howell from YouTube. And Dan was like a bit starstruck, you know what I mean? He's like, oh my goodness, it's freaking Dan. I'm Dan Howell. Dan Radcliffe. What are you doing here? Oh, what am I talking about? I know what you're doing here. Sorry, I'm just a bit flustered now. And Daniel Radcliffe's like, haha, it's fine, I'm a bigger star, I'm used to people being flustered. That being said, I don't like you being flustered, you're fired! Dan Howell's like, what are you talking about? I'm supposed to be that character name I said before, I'm supposed to be him. Get out of my sight. My nationality is vague and changing every moment. Get out of here. And so Dan was fired from the movie, which is a real shame because I think we were all excited to see Fantastic Beasts 2, Too Many Beasts. But now, it seems like my anticipation and my excitement for the film has slightly waned. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. I feel like I learned so much about our planet. I think we're all just very excited to see where this series ends up. And we'll talk a little bit more about this series when we get to our question of the week. But first, let's take a quick little break from Shane for some Dan Howell Watch. It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Tessa Brooks. The competition is shook. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, Dan has revealed that the editing is done for the movie version of Interactive Introverts and that he and Phil have recorded 2 hours of behind-the-scenes bants that will be going as the special features on the film of that tour, which is very exciting. And we actually, in a We the Unicorns exclusive, have managed to get a little bit of recording of that commentary, so we'll play that for you now. Is this thing on? Crikey, mate, it's me, Dan Howell. Throw another tour on the Barbie. I've done a bleeding tour called the Interactive Introverts, and I'm here with Phil Lester. Hello, my name is Phil Lester. I'm also here. Oh, I can't wait to talk about my tour on this audio commentary. Cowabunga, mate. Dollary dues. Wow. Exciting stuff. I hope they don't mind us leaking that. This has been, dare I say it, Dan Howell Watch. Oh my god, that episode of Dan Howell Watch. This is freaking insane. I've got chills. I've actually got chills. I mean, actually, seeing as we're talking about it, this would be a good time for me to announce that I myself am actually launching an official lipstick. Smear by Benedict. Smear it on your face today. And then just edit it on my face. No, I'm not going to put it on my face. It's literally toxic. It's been banned by almost every country. Yeah, they sell it in a country that doesn't technically exist, and then we just ship it wherever we need to. But just digitally add it to my face. What do you think about this, Bane?
I think you've done this joke too much, Ben. No one is enjoying this.
It's time for Dan Howell Watch. I need to eat. I'm delirious. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Tom Hardy. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you may know, Dan has got a brand new hobby, and that's cross-country skiing. Yes, Dan has been taking to the slopes across Europe and indeed the Americas, skiing around, trying to find good hills to go up and then down. Well, this week Dan was in one of his favourite skiing destinations, Aspen, And he made it to the top of a very cool hill, and he was going to ski down, when actually a big ski bully came along and shoved him, pushed him over. And this ski bully said to him, "Hey nerd, get off my slopes. These slopes are only for us cool kids, the kind of kids who wear leather jackets and smoke cigarettes." And Dan said, "Well, that's not going to fly with me. I'm a nice boy, and also I need to save the community centre from being closed down by a local businessman." "Well, I'll tell you what," said the bully, "if you can win the big ski race, I'll not only leave the mountain forever, but we'll save the community centre." So then, he said, "Deal." A night passed. Dan, did a lot of training. He did a big montage of training. And then it was the day of the big race, and Dan was there. The captain of the cheerleading squad was there, of course. If Dan won the race, she would give him her heart. The race began, as always, by firing a gun directly into a local member of the community. It's a very strange community. I'm being told to wrap this up. There's only 45 minutes more of this story to go. Anyway, the race began. Dan got up to a great start. The powder was flying off his skis, but the bully started to catch up with him and then overtook him. And then won. The bully won. So they burnt down the community centre, and that's right, got that. Dan was banned from the mountain, not ban was damned. Dan was banned from the mountain. Worst possible outcome. Nightmare. It's been Dan Howell Watch. Great story. Brief, concise, and to the point. Girls, hit your hallelujah. Whoo. Girls, hit your hallelujah. Whoo. Girls, hit your hallelujah. Whoo. 'Cause Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. 'Cause Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. 'Cause Uptown Funk gon' give it to ya. It's Saturday night and we're in the spot. Don't believe me, Dan Howell Watch. Oh, Jesus Christ. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Bruno Mars. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, Dan was indulging in one of his favourite pastimes, wandering the woods at night, trying to find old leftover war materials. Well, Dan was up in the Lake District, wandering around, trying to find spent shell casings or blown up tanks, when he suddenly came across something a little bit spooky. Yes, Dan was sort of wading through the thick underbrush when he saw the outline of a cottage. He walked over to the cottage and found that it was made entirely of delightful sweet treats, gingerbread, that kind of thing. Anyway, the door opened, candy cane door, standard. Door opened and an old woman came out with a crookedy nose and a bit of a pointy hat situation. She said, "Hello, my dear, we'd like to come inside, the best candy's inside." Dan was like, "You're not a witch, are you?" She was like, Yeah, I'm a witch. You got a problem with that? You're not witch racist, are you?" And Dan said, "Of course not, it's 2018, I'm not going to be witch racist." We went inside and she ate him. She just ate him alive. So he's gone now. Dan Howell is gone now, inside a witch. So it's been Dan Howell Watch. Or should I say Dan Howell Witch? Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. It was refreshing to actually have a real story for once, instead of just like a dumb, made-up one.
Oh, that is baby today, sister.
Well, that excellent James Charles impression reminds me that it's time for Dan Howell Watch! Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. Bruce, I am God. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, in anticipation for the much-hyped release of Red Dead Redemption 2, surely the biggest video game of the year, Dan Howell has got cowboy fever, and he decided to enroll himself in cowboy training school, which is a bit like puppy training school, except instead of puppies, it's humans, and instead of learning how to do walks, it's being a cowboys. So, Dan went along to the school, which was held at a nearby London ranch, and he picked himself out a hat, typical cowboy hat. He got some spurs, some chaps, and a nice horse to ride. And the cowboy instructor, I believe his name was Dennis, said to Dan, "So you want to become a cowboy, huh?" And Dan replied, "Yes, I do." So the lessons went fine. They did the normal stuff, lassoing, clipping, clopping around, tipping his hat, looking for varmints. Then, unfortunately, in a bizarre horse accident, Dan had his hat kicked off, and that gave him an instant failure, because if you lose your hat as a cowboy, you're just a regular boy. You need the hat. Once his hat was gone, they said, "You're just a boy. This is not a room for boys. This is a room for men. Cowmen," also known as cowboys. So Dan did fail, but it hasn't dampened his enthusiasm for Rockstar's upcoming open-world Western adventure, which is not a sponsor, but bloomin' should be after all that promo I just gave it. This has been Dan Howell Watch. What a great episode of Dan Howell Watch. Tip my hat to it. Well, those are our stories for the week. And you know what that means? Watch How Dan. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Louis Vuitton. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, of course, this was Halloween week. And Dan, being a spooky kind of boy, got all dressed up, ready to go trick-and-treating. Dan went in his favourite costume, Phil Lester, by slightly doing his hair in a slightly different way. And he walked around the streets and he had a little pumpkin bucket and he was asking for sweets from families. And they said things to him like, Happy Halloween. But mostly they said things to him like, why are you doing this? You're a grown man. You're not allowed to come trick-or-treating. Get away from my house. Dan was a little bit dispirited because of Halloween. But then luckily he remembered that he's really rich. So it's fine. He could just buy his own candy. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. Spooked me to my bloomin' core. You know, they say if you hold a mug to your ear, you can hear the sound of the ocean. But all I can hear is the sweet train that is Dan Howell Watch puffing into the station. Choo-choo, Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm a train choo-choo. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you know, this week it's Christmas Day. And Dan is really in the festive spirit, hanging strings of popcorn around his house, spreading jam on his front porch, and sacrificing a lamb. Standard Christmas traditions. But there's one person who doesn't want Dan to be happy this Christmas. No, not the Grinch. It's his copyright-free counterpart, the Grinch. Now, as you know, the Grinch lives in a big mountain near Dan's house and comes down every Christmas trying to ruin his Christmas by killing him with a sword. This year, the Grinch nearly succeeded, but luckily Dan used the power of friendship and an Uzi to stop him. Merry Christmas, one and all. And to all, a Merry Christmas. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. Really got me into that Christmas spirit. I will also be providing a voice in the film, Mally the Skunk. And I'll be saying my classic catchphrase, hey, who's for tennis? Hey, calm down. I know I said my catchphrase. Everyone's always like, say the catchphrase. Who's for tennis? Okay, calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Well, those are our stories for the week, and you know what that means. Oh, that's an ace, and it's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm the personification of your greatest nightmares. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, as you may know, this week was Dan's birthday. And Dan finally turned 18 years old, and so naturally he was very excited to drink, because here in the UK you can drink at 18, as opposed to in America where it's 55. Dan went along to his local bar, which is called Dan's. There's no relation, it's a weird coincidence. And he went in and he said, "Hello, Mr. Barman, I'm 18 years old today. Please may I have a glass of your freshest alcohol?" And this man said, "Young man, I don't believe that you're 18 years old because of your fresh face." And Dan said, "I've got my ID right here." And he pulled out a small piece of paper with a crayon drawing of himself that said, "Man." Now, the barman kindly explained that that's not how IDs work. Dan, in a fit of rage, punched him right in the face and got kicked out by the bouncer. Not a very happy birthday at all. But then he went home and had cake. This has been Dan Howell, and in many ways also Watch. Great story this week. I like it when they're real. Oh, would you look at the time? It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Jake Paul. Yeet. What's Dan Howell been up to this week? Well, as you know, this week was Thanksgiving. And Dan, being a good British boy, was celebrating the holiday just like everyone else. Celebrating Thanksgiving, the holiday where we give thanks to the great nation of Turkey and its delicious bird, the chicken. This Thanksgiving, Dan was gathered around the table with all of his friends and family and favourite people. There was, of course, Phil Lester, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, and Timmy, the local Victorian orphan boy. Well, Dan was there carving up the Thanksgiving bird, giving everyone a slice. "Oh, thank you, Dan," said Phil. "Oh, thank you, Dan," said Gordon Brown. "Thank you, Mr. Howell, a lovely bit of bird," said Timmy, the Victorian orphan boy. But at that point, Dan realised he'd forgotten the stuffing. And what is Thanksgiving without the stuffing? And then began a really, honestly hilarious
series of adventures and mishaps. Like, so funny. Like, Dan did all these hilarious things, and there were all these amazing YouTuber cameos, but we really don't have time to get into that now. But you would have loved to hear about it, but I just don't have time to tell you. Long story short, he completely resolved the problem, and then the day came to an end. This has been Dan Howell Watch. Great episode of Dan Howell Watch. Really got me into Thanksgiving spirit. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a cat. I don't know why she did that. She swallowed a cat. Maybe she'll be dead. There was an old lady who swallowed Dan Howell Watch. What's that all about? It's time for Dan Howell Watch. Welcome to Dan Howell Watch. I'm Victoria Beckham. What's Dan been up to this week? Well, like many of us, Dan's getting into the Christmas spirit. So he went to go and get himself a Christmas tree. He went to his nearby forest, chopped down a 50-foot tree, carried it home. He's a strong lad. He then placed it in his sitting room, destroying most of the ceiling in the process, and started putting on traditional decorations, baubles, lights, glitter, chewing gum, tap water. And he was flicking a little bit of extra tap water on there when he realized that something was missing. A star for his tree. Oh no. So he went to the local shop and said, "Excuse me, sir. Hello, Mr. Shopkeeper, sir. I really need a star for the top of my tree." And the shopkeeper said, "Well, we had a lovely star, but someone already bought it." But then the tree fell on them both, and they've been hospitalized. This has been Dan Howell Watch. What a great episode of Dan Howell Watch. It made almost too much sense.